Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and Ramzan Mubarak, as well as greetings to those Christian friends who are also fasting now. I thank the President of the UN General Assembly for inviting me to this important event, an event where we are being asked to address what might rightly be termed as the hatred of our times, Islamophobia. Islamophobia is not a new phenomenon. It has a long, dark history. But in recent years, it has mutated into a particularly virulent form, infecting multiple regions. It has now become an existential threat to Muslims in many countries. Islamophobia poses a direct threat to the Islamic identity for entire communities. Desecration of the Holy Quran, outright destruction of mosques and replacement by temples, demonization of Muslims in history books of schools, state-imposed bans on the hijab, the assault on the identity and cohesion of Muslim communities proceeds in myriad ways in different countries. Islamophobia also impacts in a deep, harmful manner on the daily existence of Muslims. In a number of countries, systemic discrimination affects their ability to access jobs, housing, and health services. This locks them in a ghettoized existence, marked by pervasive poverty and the impossibility for improving their socio-economic condition. Most ominously, Islamophobia endangers the very lives of Muslims. There are lynchings of Muslims on ridiculous charges of the so-called love jihad and by the fanatic cow vigilantes. There are also communal raids to kill Muslims and keep them marginalized. And undoubtedly, Islamophobia is a significant driver of the horrific killings of Muslims in occupied territories, such as in Indian occupied Kashmir and in Palestine. The genocide in Gaza is not simply the result of an occupation army brutally imposing its control. It is also the expression of a deep-seated hatred of a people and their religion. There is some degree of recognition of the gravity of this phenomena. We have largely moved beyond sterile debates on the semantics of Islamophobia. Work is being undertaken in academia, think tanks, to map its extent, identify its manifestations, and understand its underlying causes. Some of this work has also spilled over into policy making. A few countries have begun documenting the occurrence of Islamophobia. Some are considering a review of relevant regulations, and a few have formulated strategies for countering Islamophobia. This is encouraging, but it is a case of too little, too late. For Islamophobia is spreading and is manifesting itself in multiple harmful ways. Let me cite 3 recent reports. The 2024 report of the OIC Observatory on Islamophobia reveals that there was a concerning resurgence of Islamophobia during the reporting period, when a number of countries showing grave levels of Islamophobic incidents. The respected UK NGO Tell Mama, in its recent report, reveals that in 2024, there was a staggering 165% increase in Islamophobia incidents compared to 2022. A 2024 report of the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights informs that 1 in 2 Muslims in the EU face racism and discrimination in their daily lives. Apart from the OIC Observatory report, most reports on Islamophobia do not have a global coverage. They tend to be country or region specific. Also, these reports do not cover some of the most egregious manifestations of Islamophobia. Quran burnings, destruction of mosques, state ideologies that relegate Muslims to the category of an alien other. These seem to be outside the ambit of most reports. Also ignored by such reports is the horrific treatment of Muslims under foreign occupation, which invariably has a strong Islamophobic element. Hence, these reports, while useful, provide a limited view of the extent and intensity of Islamophobia, and in doing so, these reports circumscribe our understanding of the nature and causes of Islamophobia. So what are the reasons behind the spread and intensification of Islamophobia? The causes differ in various countries and regions. In some Western countries, a toxic mix of political and economic factors have come into play. Right-wing parties incessantly scapegoat Muslim communities in order to advance their political ambitions. And what is of increasing concern is the fact that many ostensibly centrist and even left-wing elements assert that Islam and Muslims are not compatible with so-called Western values. This creates an environment in which Islamophobia festers and flourishes. In Asia, different dynamics are at work. In some countries, there is an ethnic element. In others, there is an underplay of economic factors and the politics of extreme groups. And most disturbingly, there is one major Asian country that is in thrall to an extremist ideology that primarily targets Muslims, an ideology that is promoted by the state itself. What should be done to reverse this increasing hatred? There is a whole range of measures that needs to be taken. I shall highlight just three where the UN system itself may play a key role. One, there is a need to strengthen the international normative framework for countering Islamophobia, focusing on curbing hate speech. Specifically, there's a need to give effect to Article 20, Para 2 of ICCPR, which obliges countries to protect by law, quote, an advocacy of national, racial, or religious hatred that constitutes incitement to discrimination or hostility or violence. In this regard, we should carry forward the work of the experts who have made recommendations for operationalizing Resolution 53.1 of the Human Rights Council. After expressing concern that incidents which indeed reach the threshold of Article 20 of ICCPR are not prosecuted and punished, the experts recommend that states should ensure that their domestic legal frameworks or incitement to hatred is guided by reference to Article 20, Para 2 of the ICCPR. They further recommended that states should adopt comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation that includes preventive and punitive action to combat incitement to hatred. These recommendations need to be implemented. Two, the UN should collaborate with relevant international organizations and academic centers to comprehensively document the global incidence of Islamophobia and deepen our understanding of the factors driving this phenomenon. One outcome should be periodic reports mapping the incidence of Islamophobia and clearly naming the actors involved in Islamophobia acts. Three, a robust narrative should be developed to counter the toxic discourse of Islamophobic elements, both in the mainstream and social media. To paraphrase the opening lines of UNESCO's constitution, hatred begins in the minds of women and men, and it is the minds of women and men that the defenses against hatred must be constructed. The world is spiraling back, ladies and gentlemen, to the dark years of the early 20th century. Islamophobia is an acute manifestation of this dangerous regression. The one institution that can most effectively marshal an effective global response to this phenomenon is the United Nations. Let it not be said that the UN's response was not equal to the challenge, that when the time came, the UN was no different than in its ineffective predecessor, the League of Nations, and that its member states merely watched while the world descended into a maelstrom of hatred and horror. I thank you very much, and I'd also like to thank the Secretary General and his chef de cabinet for the presentation he made today. Thank you, Mr. President.